You ever notice how modern dating feels like a minefield? One wrong step, one emotional misstep, and suddenly you're left wondering where things went off the rails. Maybe you've been there, putting in effort, trying to connect, only to feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do the wrong thing. Here's the hard truth: if she can control your emotions, she controls the relationship. But what if there was a way to flip the script, not through games or manipulation, but through something far more powerful, unshakable inner strength? That's where Stoicism comes in. This ancient philosophy, practiced by emperors and warriors, holds the key to becoming the kind of man who stands firm, not because he's rigid or cold, but because he's mastered his own mind. And when you operate from that place of calm confidence, something fascinating happens. She can't control you because you're no longer controlled by fleeting emotions or external validation. Think about the men who have left their mark on history, figures like Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire without letting power corrupt him, or Epictetus, who endured slavery yet remained free in his mind. These weren't men who reacted to every slight or sought approval. They were grounded in principles that made them impervious to manipulation. Fast forward to today, and the same principles apply. The chaos of modern dating, the ghosting, the mixed signals, the mind games doesn't vanish, but your reaction to it can. Stoicism teaches you how to detach from outcomes, focus on what you can control, and radiate a quiet confidence that's magnetic. It's not about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally resilient. And when you embody that, you stop chasing, you stop pleading, and you start leading. This video isn't about tricks or quick fixes, it's about transformation. We're diving into 25 Stoic principles that will reshape how you show up in relationships and in life. These aren't abstract ideas, they're battle-tested tools for staying centered when drama unfolds, for making decisions from logic instead of fear, and for becoming the kind of man who inspires respect without demanding it. Imagine navigating dating with the calm certainty of a stormproof ship, unshaken by waves others can't handle. That's the power of Stoicism, and by the end of this, you'll have a blueprint to get there. So if you're ready to step into a version of yourself that no one can shake, let's begin. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That's the first and most crucial Stoic principle. Mastering your emotions isn't about suppressing them. It's about refusing to let them hijack your decisions. Picture this: she cancels plans last minute, leaves you on read, or tests you with a careless remark. The average guy spirals, texting frantically, overanalyzing, or worse, lashing out in insecurity. But the Stoic doesn't react, not because he doesn't feel anything, but because he refuses to let fleeting emotions dictate his worth or actions. Think of emotions like weather. A storm might rage outside, but inside your house, your mind, you choose whether to let the wind knock over furniture or simply watch it pass. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome during wars, plagues, and betrayals, yet his journal reveals a man who met chaos with calm. He wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. That's the key. When she's unpredictable or plays games, you don't have to internalize it. You observe, you assess, but you don't surrender your peace." Here's the practice. Next time emotions surge, pause. Ask yourself, is this feeling based on facts or fears? If she's distant, is it truly about you, or is it her own baggage? Stoicism teaches the discipline of assent, the gap between stimulus and response where your power lies. That's where you choose logic over impulse. Not every emotion deserves action. Not every provocation deserves attention. This isn't indifference, it's wisdom. The woman who senses you're unfazed by mind games loses her leverage. She can't control what doesn't rattle you, and ironically, that's what draws her closer, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've become genuinely hard to shake. Emotional mastery isn't a tactic, it's the foundation of true confidence. And that's the kind of man who doesn't just win in dating, he redefines the game. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, had a practice that might sound counterintuitive at first. He regularly imagined losing everything he valued. Not out of pessimism, but as mental armor. He called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. And in the context of relationships, this ancient exercise is shockingly effective at stripping away the power others have over your peace of mind. Here's how it works. You deliberately visualize the worst-case scenarios: her walking away, the relationship ending, the silence after an argument, not to dwell in fear, but to confront it head-on and realize you'd still be standing. Picture this: you wake up to a text that says, "We need to talk." Your stomach drops, but what if you'd already played this moment out in your mind 100 times? Not to torture yourself, but to prepare, Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about this exact idea. He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. When you've mentally rehearsed hardship, two things happen. First, the sting of the unexpected vanishes. You're no longer blindsided by emotional curveballs. Second, and more importantly, you stop clinging to outcomes like they're lifelines. That's how manipulation loses its grip. Think of it like a fire drill. No one hopes for a fire, but practicing the escape route means panic doesn't paralyze you when smoke fills the hallway. Negative visualization is your emotional fire drill. Imagine her ghosting you or testing you with jealousy games. Sit with that discomfort now while you're calm and ask yourself, what would I do? How would I move forward? The answer isn't about her, it's about you, your values, your resilience, and when you realize you'd survive, even thrive, without her approval, something shifts. You stop fearing loss, and that's when you stop being controlled by it. This isn't about expecting the worst in people. It's about trusting the best in yourself. The Stoics didn't train for hardship because they expected life to be cruel. They trained so cruelty couldn't surprise them. Apply that to dating and suddenly, her hot and cold behavior doesn't throw you off balance. You've already seen this movie, you know how it ends, and because you're not dependent on her reactions for your stability, you respond, not react, from a place of unshakable clarity. Seneca put it bluntly, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most men torment themselves with what ifs: what if she leaves? What if she's losing interest? Negative visualization flips that script. By facing those fears voluntarily, you drain them of their power. The result, you become the man who stays composed when others panic, who's unfazed by mind games because he's already outplayed them in his mind. And that's a man no one can control because he's already free. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher born into slavery, had a radical idea that cut straight to the heart of modern dating struggles. Some things are within our control and some things are not. At first glance, it sounds simple, almost obvious, but when you apply this dichotomy to relationships, it becomes a game changer. Most men waste energy trying to control the uncontrollable: her feelings, her actions, her past. Stoicism flips that script. Your boundaries aren't about dictating her behavior, they're about governing your own. Picture a man who constantly checks his phone, anxious for a reply. He's handed his peace of mind to someone else's thumbs. Now picture a different man, one who knows exactly where his agency ends. He can choose when to text, how to show up, what energy he brings. But her response, that's her territory. The moment you confuse the two, you've already lost. Epictetus put it bluntly, you are not your body or your possessions or your reputation. Those belong to others. What's truly yours, your thoughts, your judgments, your actions. Here's how this plays out in reality. Say she flakes on plans. The average guy spirals into resentment or self-doubt, but the Stoic asks, did I communicate clearly? Did I honor my own time? If the answer's yes, her choice becomes her problem, not his crisis. This isn't apathy, it's alignment. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're the foundation that keeps you upright when others wobble. Think of it like traffic laws. You can't control other drivers, but you can choose your own speed, your lane, your focus. The guy who tailgates and rages at red lights arrives just as late, but with his blood pressure spiking. Relationships work the same way. You don't control her moods or decisions, but you decide your standards, how you'll be spoken to, how much inconsistency you'll tolerate when you'll walk away. And here's the secret: those standards firmly held filter out the wrong people before you ever need to enforce them. Epictetus trained his students to differentiate between prohertikon, what's up to us, and aproherton, what isn't. Apply that to dating and suddenly her mixed signals aren't a puzzle to solve their data. If she's inconsistent, that's her character revealing itself. Your move isn't to fix it, it's to choose whether to engage. The Stoic doesn't beg for respect, he embodies it by knowing what he'll accept. This clarity is magnetic. It's not about being rigid or unfeeling, it's about being rooted. When she sees you won't chase, apologize for her rudeness, or shrink your worth to fit her whims, something shifts. The power dynamic isn't forced, it's natural, because the man who knows his boundaries doesn't need to announce them. He lives them, and that's how you become the one she can't control, because you've already decided what you control. Cato the Younger, one of Rome's most uncompromising Stoics, didn't just preach discipline, he lived it in ways that would make most modern men shudder. He wore rough, uncomfortable clothing in winter, walked barefoot on frost-covered roads, and ate the simplest meals even when wealth could have afforded him luxury. Why? Because he understood a truth most men avoid: comfort is the enemy of resilience. When you train yourself to embrace discomfort voluntarily, you strip life's inconveniences of their power to throw you off balance. In dating and in life, that translates to a quiet, unshakable confidence no mind game can penetrate. Think about how most guys operate today. They chase convenience, endless scrolling, fast food, temperature-controlled rooms. Then when a woman throws them a curveball, ghosting, mixed signals, a last-minute cancellation, they unravel. Their comfort-addicted nervous system treats emotional friction like a threat. But what if you rewired that response? What if discomfort became your training ground instead of your kryptonite? Start small, take cold showers, skip the snooze button. Walk instead of drive. These aren't just random challenges, they're microdoses of hardship that fortify your emotional immune system. Muscles grow through resistance. So does character. When you willingly face physical discomfort, you prove to yourself that minor inconveniences like her taking hours to reply aren't emergencies. Cato didn't sleep on stone beds to prove he was tough. He did it to remind himself that luxury was optional, not essential. That's the mindset shift. When you know you can handle discomfort, external validation stops being your oxygen. Here's the dating parallel. Ever noticed how some men panic when a woman pulls back? They double text, over-explain, or beg for clarity. Contrast that with the man who's endured freezing showers at dawn. He's learned to sit with unease. Her silence doesn't trigger desperation. It's just another minor discomfort he's trained to navigate. That emotional stamina changes everything. Suddenly, her hot and cold behavior doesn't dictate your mood because you've already mastered something far more demanding than waiting for a text. The Stoics called this ascesis, deliberate practice. It's not about suffering for its own sake. It's about inoculating yourself against life's inevitable frustrations. Imagine two men at a restaurant. One gets irritated when the service is slow, his mood crumbling over a delayed meal. The other, he fasted for 16 hours yesterday by choice. Waiting an extra 20 minutes isn't a crisis, it's nothing compared to what he's already willingly endured. That's the power of voluntary discomfort. It recalibrates your tolerance for life's minor annoyances, including dating's unpredictability. This isn't about becoming numb. It's about expanding your emotional bandwidth. When you've walked 5 miles in the rain because you chose to, a cancelled date isn't a blow to your self-worth, it's a scheduling change. When you've eaten plain rice while your friends indulge in steak, her flirtation with another guy isn't a threat, it's information. You've already proven to yourself that you can thrive without pampering. That knowledge deep in your bones transforms how you show up in relationships. No need for performative aloofness, no desperate bids for attention. Just calm, grounded presence that comes from knowing discomfort won't break you. Cato's rigor wasn't masochism, it was liberation. By routinely facing small hardships, he ensured no external circumstance, whether political betrayal or personal rejection, could destabilize him. Apply that today, and dating's petty power plays lose their sting. You stop fearing her withdrawal because you've practiced standing firm in far colder winds. And paradoxically, that's what makes you magnetic. Women sense when a man's confidence isn't borrowed, when it's been forged through real challenges, not just empty posturing. So ask yourself, where have you been too comfortable? Where could you lean into resistance? Start today. Skip the elevator. Turn off notifications for an afternoon. Say no to something easy. Each small victory over comfort builds the mental calluses that let you navigate dating and life without begging for reassurance. Because the man who's at home in discomfort can't be controlled by it. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, had a rule that would revolutionize modern dating if more men followed it. Practice not seeming to know what you know. In other words, speak less than necessary. This isn't about playing mysterious or hiding your intelligence. It's about understanding the gravitational pull of restraint. Think of the men who command attention in a room. They're rarely the loudest. They're the ones who listen more than they talk, who measure their words like precious currency. In relationships, this discipline is your secret weapon. Consider how most guys react when a woman pulls back. They flood her with texts, long paragraphs explaining their feelings, pleading for clarity, or worse, accusing her of playing games. Every message is another brick in the wall of desperation. Now contrast that with the Stoic approach. Rufus taught that unnecessary words dilute power. When you speak sparingly, each word carries weight. Silence isn't emptiness, it's space for her to wonder, to step forward, to invest. Here's the psychology behind it. Humans assign value to what's scarce. Oversharing your thoughts, your insecurities, your daily minutiae doesn't build intimacy. It burns through it like cheap fuel. But when you resist the urge to fill every silence, something shifts. She starts to lean in, not because you're manipulating her, but because you've shown the rarest trait in modern dating, self-containment. Take Julius Caesar as a case study. Historians note he mastered the art of brevity. His letters were famously concise. When Pompey's forces outnumbered his 10-1, Caesar didn't rally his troops with a speech. He simply said, "The die is cast," and crossed the Rubicon. That's the power of economy in language. In dating, your silence after she tests you says more than 1,000 defensive texts ever could. Practical application. Next time you're tempted to over-explain, pause. Ask, is this necessary? Does it serve my purpose or just my anxiety? Most conversations don't require your full autobiography. A raised eyebrow can communicate more than a monologue. Rufus warned students that the tongue is like a wild horse without discipline. It runs away with you. This isn't about becoming stoic in the pop culture sense, cold, detached. It's about precision. When you speak less, your words land harder. Your compliments feel earned, not automatic. Your boundaries don't need loud declarations. A simple, "I don't tolerate that," carries more authority when it's not drowned in emotional noise. Watch how people react when you break the modern habit of verbal diarrhea. They lean closer, they listen harder, they respect more, because the man who isn't desperate to be understood isn't easily controlled. Your silence isn't a tactic, it's the evidence of a mind at peace with itself. And that's the kind of presence no one can manipulate. Seneca's letters reveal a truth most men resist. Attachment to specific outcomes is the root of suffering in love and life. He wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's the core of amor fati, the Stoic practice of loving fate, not just enduring it. Imagine two men. One obsesses over whether she'll text back, agonizing over every minute of silence. The other, he sends his message and returns to his work, his peace untouched by her response. Both face the same uncertainty, only one is free. This isn't about indifference. It's about recognizing that your happiness can't be hostage to someone else's choices. Seneca lost his health, his wealth, and eventually his life at the whim of Emperor Nero. Yet his writings show a man who refused to let external events dictate his inner world. He cultivated a mindset modern daters desperately need. This is what happened. Now, how do I proceed with wisdom? No tantrums, no victimhood, just clear-eyed adaptation. Think of amor fati as emotional jiu-jitsu, using life's resistance to strengthen your stance. When she cancels plans, the average guy spirals into resentment. The Stoic asks, what opportunity does this open? Maybe it's time for the gym, or a neglected project, or simply stillness. Nietzsche, who borrowed this Stoic concept, put it perfectly. My formula for greatness is amor fati, not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. That shift from resistance to acceptance changes everything. Here's how to practice it. First, differentiate between preference and demand. You can prefer she responds promptly, but demanding it turns her actions into your prison. Seneca advised Lucilius to wish for what you have, not what you don't. When you release the death grip on how things should be, you notice what is, and that's where your power lies. Second, reframe setbacks as fuel. After his exile to Corsica, Seneca didn't wallow. He wrote consolation to Helvia to comfort his mother, and in doing so turned personal agony into timeless wisdom. Modern translation: if she ghosts you, that's material for growth, not proof of inadequacy. Journal the lesson, hit the weights, let rejection polish you instead of break you. Finally, trust the process. The Stoics saw fate not as a rigid script, but as raw material for virtue. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "The obstacle becomes the way." Every silent treatment, every unanswered text, every dating app dead end is a chance to practice detachment. And here's the paradox: when you stop needing her validation to feel whole, you become the man who attracts it effortlessly. Seneca's ultimate test came when Nero ordered his suicide. Even then, his farewell was a masterclass in amor fati. He reassured grieving friends, dictated his final thoughts, and bled out with the same calm he'd brought to dinner parties. That's the goal, not to eliminate desire, but to eliminate desperation. When you love fate, including the uncertainties of dating, you stop chasing outcomes and start shaping character. And that's a man no one can control, because he's already at peace with whatever comes. The Stoics didn't just preach virtue, they saw it as the ultimate form of power. And nowhere does this resonate more than in the four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These aren't abstract ideals, they're the bedrock of a masculinity that draws women in without begging for attention. Let's start with wisdom, not just book smarts, but the kind of sharp discernment that cuts through drama. Picture a man who doesn't fall for petty arguments or get dragged into emotional chaos. He listens more than he speaks, asks the right questions, and spots manipulation before it takes root. That's practical wisdom in action. It's what separates the guy who gets played from the one who sees the game and chooses not to play. Courage is next, but not the Hollywood version of chest-thumping bravado. Real courage is quieter. It's the willingness to walk away from toxic dynamics, to set boundaries without apology, to risk rejection by being authentic. Think of Marcus Aurelius leading troops into battle while jotting in his journal about mastering fear. That same energy applies when you refuse to chase someone who treats you as an option. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the refusal to let fear dictate your standards. Then there's justice, not just courtroom fairness, but a deep-rooted integrity. The Stoics called this giving each their due. In dating, that means respecting her agency while demanding respect for your own. It's the man who doesn't ghost because he wouldn't tolerate being ghosted. Who doesn't play mind games because he expects honesty in return. Justice is magnetic because it signals safety. Women sense when a man's moral code isn't negotiable, and that's the kind of reliability that builds trust without words. Finally, temperance, the most misunderstood virtue. This isn't about repression, it's about mastery. The Stoic doesn't suppress desire, he channels it. Imagine two men at a party. One can't stop staring, his thirst obvious. The other engages, enjoys the moment, but never seems desperate. That's temperance. It's the discipline to keep passion in check until it's earned, not spilled like cheap wine. Together, these virtues create a man who doesn't need to manipulate because he's too busy embodying what others pretend to be. Wisdom guides his choices, courage fuels his boundaries, justice grounds his interactions, temperance gives him poise, and when she encounters that combination, she doesn't just respect it, she's drawn to it, because the man who leads with virtue isn't just unshakable, he's unforgettable. Epictetus used a simple but brutal metaphor to explain why most men suffer unnecessarily in relationships. Imagine dropping a precious vase. It shatters on the floor. Now, here's the critical question: where does your pain actually come from? The broken clay, or your belief that the vase shouldn't have broken? That's the Stoic revelation. Suffering isn't in the event itself, but in our resistance to it. Think about how this plays out in dating. She leaves you on read. The facts are straightforward. A message was delivered and no reply came. But the average guy doesn't just observe that, he layers it with judgments. She's ignoring me. I must have said something wrong. What if she's with someone else? That's the equivalent of staring at the shattered vase, screaming, "This shouldn't have happened." Meanwhile, the Stoic sees the same fragments and thinks, vases break. What's next? This isn't about being emotionless. It's about recognizing that your interpretations, not her actions, are the source of your turmoil. Epictetus drilled this into his students. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. When she suddenly cools off, you have two choices: weep over the broken relationship or accept that people change and recalibrate. One path keeps you trapped, the other frees you to act with clarity. Consider a real-world parallel. Two men get ghosted. The first spirals, "She was perfect. I'll never find someone like her again. This proves I'm not good enough." The second acknowledges the disappointment but refuses to catastrophize. "Her silence tells me everything I need to know." Onward, same event, radically different outcomes. The difference isn't what happened, it's what each man decided it meant about his worth. Here's the practice. Next time a dating setback hits, a rejection, a flaky excuse, a sudden change of heart, pause. Ask yourself, what are the bare facts here? Strip away the stories you're telling yourself about what it means. The facts might be, she cancelled, she didn't text back, she's seeing someone else. Hard, yes, but not inherently devastating unless you insist reality should conform to your expectations. Epictetus was relentless on this point. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. That's the secret. The man who can watch his expectations shatter like that vase, shrug, and start sweeping up the pieces. He's the one who can't be controlled because he's already mastered the only thing that ever truly controls us, our own judgments. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not for fame but for self-examination, a habit that reveals one of Stoicism's sharpest tools for modern men, the art of indifference. Not the cold, aloof kind, but the liberating ability to distinguish between what deserves your energy and what doesn't. The Stoics called this adiaphora, things neither good nor bad in themselves. Think of it like this: her compliments don't inflate your worth, and her criticisms don't deflate it. Your value isn't up for debate. The emperor wrote in his Meditations, "It's silly to try to escape other people's faults. They are inescapable, just try to escape your own." That's indifference in action, not ignoring reality, but refusing to let someone else's opinion become your compass. Picture two men. One beams when she calls him amazing, then crumbles when she says he's clingy. The other, he listens, considers, but his self-assessment doesn't hinge on her moods. That's the difference between neediness and true confidence. Modern dating runs on validation, likes, replies, the thrill of someone attractive noticing you. But the Stoics saw through that chase 2,000 years ago. Marcus warned how quickly fame fades into obscurity. He ruled an empire, yet his private writings obsess over character, not applause. Apply that today. When you're tempted to fish for compliments or over-explain yourself after a snub, ask, does this serve my growth or just my ego? Here's how to practice this. First, audit your motivations. Are you texting her to connect or to prove you're still relevant? Are you dressing sharp for yourself or for her approval? Indifference isn't neglect. It's grounding your actions in your standards, not her reactions. Second, embrace the gray zone. Most dating hiccups aren't catastrophes or victories, they're neutral data. Her maybe isn't a referendum on your worth, it's just a scheduled conflict. Marcus famously said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." Swap men for matches, and the lesson holds. A woman's interest or lack of it isn't a measure of your character unless you let it be. Cultivating indifference means caring deeply about your integrity, but lightly about the noise. That's how you become the man who can't be controlled because you've stopped handing out the remote. There's a Stoic exercise that changes everything about how you approach time and, by extension, relationships. It's called memento mori. Remember, you must die. Before you dismiss it as morbid, consider this. What if the awareness of life's brevity isn't about fear, but about focus? The Stoics didn't dwell on death to depress themselves. They used it as a whetstone to sharpen their priorities. Picture two men. One wastes evenings scrolling through old photos of an ex, replaying arguments long dead. The other knows his time is limited, so he invests it in connections that nourish him, walks away from ones that drain him, and never begs for attention from someone who treats his presence as optional. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's the power of memento mori in dating. When you internalize that your days are numbered, trivial dramas lose their grip. Her hot and cold behavior, either address it with calm clarity or move on, but don't waste weeks dissecting her mixed signals. The clock is ticking. Why ration your energy to someone who treats it like an afterthought? Think of time as currency. Most men spend it recklessly, chasing validation from people who don't value them, overcommitting to dead-end relationships out of inertia, or clinging to potential instead of reality. The Stoic invests time like a billionaire with terminal cancer, strategically, deliberately, with zero tolerance for what doesn't serve his growth. Seneca put it bluntly, life is long if you know how to use it. He wasn't talking about quantity of years, but quality of moments. The man who owns his time doesn't wait for permission to set standards. He doesn't linger where he's not valued. He understands that every hour spent tolerating disrespect is an hour stolen from his peace, and that's a theft he can't afford. Here's how this plays out practically. Next time you're tempted to chase someone indifferent, ask, if I had 1 year left to live, would this be how I spend my time? Not as a guilt trip, but as a litmus test for authenticity. The answer isn't about her, it's about you. Are you showing up in relationships from abundance or desperation? Are you choosing partners who amplify your life or ones who shrink it? History's most remarkable men lived with this urgency. Steve Jobs famously said death was life's greatest invention. It strips away all that's unimportant. The Stoics agreed. Epictetus taught his students to live each day as if it were their last, not in hedonism but in intentionality. Imagine applying that to modern dating. No more tolerating breadcrumbing because you're afraid of being alone. No more sacrificing your goals for someone who won't commit. When death is your advisor, compromise has limits. This isn't about being ruthless, it's about being awake. The woman who senses you treasure your time won't dare waste it, not because you've threatened her, but because your energy is palpably precious. You don't need to announce your boundaries, your actions telegraph them. You reply when convenient, not anxiously. You plan dates around your purpose, not her whims. And when someone consistently treats your time as disposable, you don't rage, you simply stop making withdrawals from an empty account. Marcus scribbled in his journal, "Think of yourself as dead." You have lived your life, now take what's left and live it properly. That's the memento mori mindset, not paralysis but propulsion. When you stop pretending you have forever, you start living like today matters. And that's the man no one can control because he's too busy owning his life. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, didn't just philosophize about life, he lived it. Before becoming a thinker, he was a merchant who lost everything in a shipwreck. Stranded in Athens with nothing, he could have drowned in self-pity. Instead, he walked into a bookstore, stumbled upon Socrates' teachings, and asked the clerk, "Where can I find a man like this?" That moment didn't just change his career, it revealed the core of Stoicism. Wisdom without action is just noise. Fast forward to today, and you'll find men drowning in podcasts, books, and motivational quotes, but paralyzed when it's time to act. Zeno's lesson: philosophy isn't a spectator sport. Think about how modern dating rewards passivity. Guys overanalyze texts for hidden meanings, wait for perfect moments to make moves, or hope their vibes will somehow telegraph interest without risk. Contrast that with Stoic pragmatism. Epictetus put it bluntly, "If you want to be a writer, write." Translation: if you want connection, connect. Hesitation isn't strategy, it's surrender. The man who waits for guarantees before acting will always be outmaneuvered by the one who embraces uncertainty as part of the process. Zeno's pivot from shipwreck victim to philosopher king wasn't magic. It was a series of decisive choices. He didn't plan to rebuild, he started. He didn't consider studying, he asked. Apply that to dating. The guy who spends weeks crafting the perfect opener misses the window, while the Stoic sends a simple, authentic message and moves forward. Action isn't reckless, it's the antidote to overthinking. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "Don't talk about what a good man is, be one." That's the difference between men who theorize about confidence and those who embody it. Here's where modern men get stuck. They confuse preparation with progress. Reading 10 articles on how to flirt doesn't replace actually speaking to a woman. Watching videos on body language won't compensate for avoiding eye contact in person. The Stoics called this the paralysis of analysis. Seneca warned, "While we prepare life, it passes." Every hour spent getting ready to live is an hour lost. The solution: act first, refine later. Take cold approach as an example. Most guys psych themselves out imagining worst-case scenarios: rejection, embarrassment, awkward silence. The Stoic reframes it: what's the actual cost? A few seconds of discomfort, compared to Zeno losing his entire livelihood. That's trivial. Action shrinks fear because it replaces abstract dread with concrete experience. The first time you approach, your heart races. By the 10th, it's routine. That's how courage builds, not in theory, but in practice. This isn't about blind impulsivity. Stoic action is deliberate but unhesitating. Think of a firefighter entering a burning building. He trains rigorously, so when crisis hits, he moves with precision, not panic. Dating demands the same. Internalize this. You will never feel ready. Waiting for confidence before action is like waiting to get in shape before hitting the gym. Confidence comes from action, not before it. Zeno's legacy wasn't just his teachings, it was his example. He didn't just discuss virtue, he lived it through daily choices. Modern application: stop treating attraction like a puzzle to solve and start treating it as a muscle to flex. Send the text, ask her out, walk away from games. Each act reinforces a truth deeper than any pickup line. The man who controls his actions can't be controlled by others' reactions. The Stoic mantra here is simple: do the thing and you'll have the power. Not the other way around. When you prioritize action over approval, you stop fearing outcomes because you're too busy creating them. That's the unshakable man Zeno modeled. No shipwreck could break him. No woman's indifference will break you. Cato the Younger once walked through the Roman Forum while an opponent hurled insults at him, not just casual jabs, but vicious personal attacks designed to provoke. The crowd expected fireworks, a dramatic confrontation. Instead, Cato kept walking, undisturbed. When someone later asked why he didn't retaliate, his reply cut to the core of Stoic composure: "It's harder to be insulted than to insult." That moment wasn't just about self-control. It was a masterclass in the Stoic pause, the deliberate gap between provocation and response where true power resides. Modern dating is full of provocations: a sarcastic comment disguised as a joke, a last-minute cancellation framed as bad timing. The temptation to fire back, to demand an explanation, or worse, to crumble inwardly, is overwhelming. That's where Cato's discipline becomes your secret weapon. The Stoic pause isn't about swallowing your pride, it's about reclaiming your sovereignty. When you react instantly, you hand her the remote control to your emotions. But when you pause, you become the man who can't be baited. Here's how to train this. First, recognize the hook, the part of her comment or behavior that stings. Maybe she compares you to an ex or playfully needles your insecurities. Your nervous system will scream to retaliate or retreat. This is the critical moment. Breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. That 12-second window is where impulsive reactions go to die. The Stoics called this prosauche, vigilant self-awareness. In that pause, ask, is this true? Does responding serve me? Most provocations crumble under scrutiny. History offers a brutal example. When Cato's political rival spat in his face during a debate, the crowd gasped. Cato wiped his cheek and said, "I will swear to anyone that you are wrong when you say I cannot be angry." No outburst, no suppressed rage, just calm proof that his peace wasn't for sale. Translate that to dating. When she tests you with a backhanded compliment, "You're cute." For an engineer, the Stoic doesn't correct her or seek validation. He might smirk and change the subject, not because he's weak, but because her opinion doesn't dictate his worth. The pause does something else. It reveals intention. Most provocations aren't about you. They're about the other person's insecurity or boredom. Like a toddler throwing a tantrum, the goal is often just to elicit any reaction. When you refuse to supply it, the game ends. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In dating terms, the best response to mind games is to stop playing. Practical drill: next time you feel provoked, whether by a text left unanswered or a sharp remark, delay all response by 10 minutes. Use that time to journal. Write down what you want to say, then what you should say. The gap between those two is where emotional maturity grows. Epictetus trained his students to see insults like arrows. If someone shoots at you and misses, who's harmed? Now, if they hit a shield you're holding, who's harmed? The shield. Your pause is that shield. This isn't about being passive. There are times when boundaries need voicing, but never from a place of triggered emotion. The Stoic waits until his pulse is steady, then speaks with surgical precision. Like Cato calmly dismantling his opponent's arguments in the Senate, you address disrespect not with heat but with unshakable clarity. "I don't engage with those comments" lands harder than any counterattack when delivered with icy calm. Composure isn't neutrality. It's the quiet confidence of a man who knows his value isn't up for debate. When she sees insults bounce off you like rain off marble, something shifts. The provocations either stop or escalate to reveal her true character. Either way, you win. Because the man who controls his reactions can't be controlled by anyone else's chaos. Marcus Aurelius faced rebellion, betrayal, and plague during his reign, yet his personal writings reveal a man who saw each crisis not as a curse, but as raw material for growth. That's the essence of the impediment becomes the way, a Stoic superpower that transforms victimhood into sovereignty. Most men crumble under setbacks. Why does this always happen to me? The Stoic asks a different question. How does this reveal my next step? Picture two men who lose their jobs. The first spirals into self-pity, blaming the economy, his boss, fate. The second assesses his skills, networks aggressively, and uses the sudden free time to train for a better role. Same event, radically different trajectories. Marcus scribbled in his journal, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path. Within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition." That's not motivational fluff, it's tactical reframing. When she ghosts you, the obstacle isn't her silence, it's your dependence on external validation. The path, rebuilding self-worth no text message can shake. History's greatest innovators mastered this alchemy. Thomas Edison's lab burned to the ground at 67, destroying years of research. His response: "Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up, now we can start fresh." That's Stoic resilience in action. Modern dating serves similar fires: rejection, mixed signals, heartbreak. The victim complains dating apps are rigged or women only want bad boys. The Stoic logs off, improves his profile, and approaches in person, because the obstacle algorithmic dating reveals the way real-world connection. Here's how to practice this. First, audit your language. "She ruined my night by canceling" becomes, "Her cancellation gave me time for the project I'd neglected." Second, mine setbacks for data. If dates fizzle, ask, "Am I selecting for attraction over compatibility?" Third, embrace antifragility, Nassim Taleb's concept that some things grow stronger under stress. Muscles tear to rebuild bigger. Relationships either deepen through conflict or expose their weakness. Marcus faced Germanic tribes invading Rome's borders, a literal obstacle. His solution: he didn't just push them back, he studied their tactics, adapted Rome's defenses, and wrote philosophy in his tent at night. The impediment war forced him to become a better strategist, leader, and thinker. Apply that to dating. Her emotional unavailability isn't a dead end, it's a mirror showing where you've tolerated crumbs instead of banquets. The victim waits for perfect conditions. The Stoic knows storms are where sailors earn their stripes. When you stop seeing setbacks as personal injustices and start treating them as training modules, something shifts. Rejection becomes redirection. Silence becomes space for reflection. Even betrayal becomes a masterclass in discernment. As Marcus wrote, "The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it." Be that fire, let every obstacle fuel your ascent. Seneca's letters reveal a counterintuitive truth about pleasure. The more you indulge without restraint, the weaker your happiness becomes. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That's the heart of Stoic self-denial, not punishment, but immunization against life's unpredictability. Picture two men. One needs gourmet meals, constant stimulation, and daily validation to feel content. The other routinely eats plain food, embraces boredom, and fasts from distractions. When life strips away comforts, as it inevitably does, who collapses, who adapts? The Stoics called this ascesis, voluntary discomfort to fortify the soul. Seneca practiced it by wearing cheap clothes in winter, sleeping on hard beds, and eating stale bread. Not because he hated pleasure, but because he refused to let it become his master. Modern translation: if you can't tolerate a weekend without social media, how will you handle her silence? If a delayed meal ruins your mood, how will you navigate rejection? Self-denial is the gym for your emotional resilience. Here's how to apply it. First, audit your dependencies. What comforts do you cling to? Late night scrolling, Junk food, constant texting, pick one and abstain not forever, but long enough to prove you're in charge. Seneca advised Lucilius to set aside days to practice poverty. Skip coffee, walk instead of Uber, wear your least favorite shirt. Each small act of refusal strengthens your no muscle, the same muscle that lets you walk away from toxic relationships without looking back. Second, embrace emptiness. The average guy panics when he's alone with his thoughts. The Stoic schedules it. Sit in silence for 10 minutes daily. No music, no podcasts, just you and your mind. Like Marcus Aurelius staring into the Danube at dawn, you'll find clarity in stillness. When you're comfortable with nothing, no one can threaten you with loss. Finally, reframe deprivation as discovery. Seneca fasted to remember food's true purpose, not indulgence but fuel. When you voluntarily step away from dopamine hits, alcohol, porn, video games, you reset your baseline for joy. Suddenly, ordinary moments, a conversation, sunlight, a cold glass of water become vivid again. That's the hidden gift of self-denial. It doesn't shrink your happiness, it deepens your capacity to feel it. History's most resilient men understood this. Teddy Roosevelt, influenced by Stoicism, endured blizzards and grisly hunts to harden himself. He didn't avoid discomfort, he chased it. Apply that to dating. When you've practiced going without attention, her indifference doesn't destabilize you. When you've trained in boredom, you don't rely on her to fill your emptiness. Seneca's most radical suggestion: let poverty test you, not financial poverty, emotional poverty. Can you be at peace without her texts, without dates lined up? Without validation, that's the ultimate test of sovereignty. The man who can sit alone in a quiet room, content with his own company, is the man no one can control because he's already free. Epictetus didn't just teach philosophy, he lived it with a brutal consistency that left no room for empty promises. His rule was simple: don't speak much about what a good man is, be one. That's the core of Stoic integrity. Your word isn't just something you say, it's something you solidify through action. Most men underestimate the power of this. They'll swear they'll call, promise to change, vow to set boundaries, then crumble at the first test. But the Stoic knows something deeper. Every broken word is a crack in your character, and every kept one is a brick in an unshakable foundation. Think about modern dating. How many guys say they'll walk away if disrespected, only to backtrack when she gives half-hearted attention, or claim they're done chasing, yet slide into her DMs the moment she posts a selfie? Epictetus saw this pattern 2,000 years ago. If you want to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters, but never in integrity. Translation: it doesn't matter how smooth your game is if your actions don't match your words. Women people really don't listen to what you declare, they watch what you tolerate. Here's where most men fail. They confuse intentions with integrity. Saying, "I don't tolerate drama," means nothing if you entertain it. Vowing, "I'll never beg for attention," is hollow if you panic when she's distant. The Stoic solution: underpromise and overdeliver. Better yet, let your actions speak first. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as emperor. He refused lavish ceremonies, not through grand speeches, but by quietly living simply. His subjects didn't need to hear about his humility. They saw it in his choices. Practical application: audit your patterns. If you tell a woman you're busy Friday but cancel plans when she texts last minute, you've shown her your schedule, and your self-respect are negotiable. If you say you'll leave if lied to but stay after catching her in a fib, you've taught her your boundaries are decorative. Epictetus warned, "First decide who you want to be, then do what you must." Every kept promise, no matter how small, is a vote for that version of yourself. History's most respected men understood this. George Washington's contemporaries didn't follow him because of his speeches, they trusted his track record. When he pledged to surrender power after the Revolutionary War, then actually did it, that unbroken word built a nation. In dating, the stakes are smaller, but the principles identical. The man who says, "I'll call at 8," and does, who vows to walk if betrayed and follows through. He doesn't need to demand respect, it's given automatically. There's a psychological power here too. When she sees your yes means yes and your no means no, something shifts. She stops testing because the results are predictable. No more, "Will he freak if I cancel?" or "Can I get away with this?" Your consistency becomes your reputation. And ironically, that's when you gain real freedom, because people stop pushing the limits they know you'll enforce. This isn't about rigidity, it's about alignment. The Stoic doesn't make grand oaths he can't keep, he commits to what he controls. If traffic might delay him, he says, "I'll aim for 7," instead of "I'll be there at 7." If he's unsure about feelings, he stays silent until clarity arrives, because Epictetus knew, better to trip with the feet than with the tongue. Every unforced promise is a potential failure waiting to happen. So start small. Next time you tell yourself you'll hit the gym, go. When you vow to stop checking her social media, follow through. These micro wins build the neural pathways for bigger ones. Soon, keeping your word becomes identity, not just to others, but to yourself. And that's the ultimate payoff. When you trust your own promises, external validation becomes optional. The Stoics didn't preach perfection, they preached progression. Even Marcus Aurelius admitted failing sometimes, but he journaled about it, recalibrated, and recommitted. Your goal isn't to never slip, it's to make your word so sacred that breaking it feels like betraying yourself. Because in the end, integrity isn't about controlling her perception. It's about controlling the one thing you truly can, your own honor. And that's the kind of man no one can manipulate, because his loyalty to himself is non-negotiable. Musonius Rufus had a rule that would silence half the conversations in modern bars and group chats if men followed it. Avoid discussing the faults of others as you would avoid poison. That might sound extreme until you realize what gossip actually does to your presence. Think of the last time you heard a man tearing someone down behind their back, maybe a coworker, an ex, a rival. Did he seem stronger for it, or did his words subtly shrink him in your eyes? The Stoics understood something neuroscience now confirms. Your speech doesn't just describe your character, it shapes it. Every time you indulge in toxic talk, you're not just revealing pettiness, you're practicing it. Consider two men at a social gathering. One leans in, eager to share the latest drama. "Did you hear about Mark's divorce? Rumor is he got cheated on, no surprise. The guy's always been insecure." The other listens, then changes the subject to an upcoming project or a book that moved him. Who commands more respect? Who would you trust with your struggles? Gossip isn't just information, it's energy. And the man who traffics in negativity broadcasts that he's comfortable dwelling in the shallow end of human interaction. Musonius didn't just warn against gossip because it was unkind, he saw it as a direct threat to masculine gravity. In his lectures, he compared toxic speech to a cracked vessel. Just as a damaged jar spoils the wine inside, a loose tongue ruins the mind's clarity. Ancient wisdom, but watch how it plays out today. The guy who dissects his friend's failed relationship over beers isn't just killing time. He's training his brain to see people as problems, not possibilities. Meanwhile, the Stoic redirects conversations toward ideas, growth, or solutions. That shift alone elevates him above the noise. Here's the deeper cost most men miss. Gossip creates dependency on others' misfortunes for entertainment, on shared negativity for bonding. It's why toxic workplaces and social circles feel sticky even when they drain you. The Stoic alternative: build connection through aspiration, not degradation. When your friends start venting about someone's mistakes, steer the dialogue forward. What's the lesson here? How would you handle it differently? That pivot doesn't just protect your integrity, it upgrades the entire group's mindset. Practical drill: for 1 week, impose a blackout on all third-party talk unless it's factual, necessary, or constructive. No, can you believe she? No, guess what I heard about? Notice two things. First, how often others try to pull you into drama because your silence exposes their habit. Second, how much mental space clears when you're not mentally rehearsing other people's flaws. That's the Musonius effect. Your words carve either monuments or ditches in your character. Choose wisely. The ultimate test. When you're tempted to share that juicy piece of gossip, ask, would I say this if the person was standing here? If the answer's no, you're not communicating, you're contaminating. The Stoic doesn't need to announce his principles, his speech reflects them. And that's the kind of presence no one can diminish because it's built on something far stronger than other people's failings. Epictetus, born into slavery and crippled by a brutal master, had every reason to blame the world for his suffering. Yet his teachings reveal a radical idea that flips victimhood on its head. What upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. That's the essence of proherses, the Stoic concept of moral choice that separates what happens to you from what you do with it. Imagine two men. One gets passed over for promotion and spends weeks complaining about office politics. The other assesses his skills, updates his resume, and starts networking immediately. Same setback, different responses. The difference isn't luck, it's recognizing that your power doesn't lie in controlling events, but in mastering your interpretation of them. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's the ultimate hack for emotional freedom. When Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters," he wasn't preaching passivity. He was mapping the mind's control panel. Think of proherses as your internal compass. External events, her rejection, a job loss, even physical pain, are like weather. You can't stop the storm, but you choose whether to curse the rain or dance in it. The average guy lets circumstances dictate his mood. She ghosted me, so I'll sulk. The Stoic examines his own role. Did I ignore red flags? Did I invest too quickly? That shift, from why is this happening to me to what can I learn from this, is the birth of real power. History's most resilient figures embodied this. Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and tortured for 7 years, credited Epictetus for his survival. In solitary confinement, he realized his captors could break his body but never his will to choose his response. That's proherses in the arena, the unshakable knowing that between stimulus and response, there's always a gap, and in that gap lies your sovereignty. Modern applications. When she flakes on dates, the victim whines about unreliable women. The Stoic audits his vetting process. Did I overlook inconsistency? Here's how to train this muscle. First, practice ownership language. Replace "she made me angry" with "I chose to react with anger." Second, conduct nightly post-mortems. Marcus Aurelius did this in his journals, asking, "Where did I hand over my power today?" Third, embrace the inverse obstacle rule. For every complaint, identify one way you contributed to the problem. The guy who blames dating apps for his dry spell hasn't considered his profile's weak photos or low-effort messages. The irony, taking responsibility feels heavy at first but becomes liberation. Like a sailor who stops cursing the wind and learns to adjust his sails, you stop wasting energy on what you can't change and start investing in what you can. Your standards, your growth, your boundaries. That's the secret Epictetus whispered from his chains. No man is free who is not master of himself. When you stop outsourcing blame, you reclaim authorship of your life. And that's the kind of man no one can control because he's too busy steering his own ship. William Irvine, a philosophy professor and former Navy SEAL, took Stoic principles into some of the most grueling environments on Earth and proved their power in the modern world. His story bridges ancient wisdom and battlefield-tested resilience, showing how mental toughness isn't about suppressing fear, but rewiring your relationship with discomfort. Imagine BOD/S training, the infamous SEAL selection course where candidates endure sleep deprivation, freezing ocean swims, and relentless physical punishment. Most quit when their bodies scream to stop, But Irvine discovered something deeper. The real battle wasn't in the muscles, it was in the mind's interpretation of pain. That's where Stoicism became his secret weapon. He applied a concept the ancients called proseuche, relentless attention to the present moment. When instructors ordered trainees to lie in freezing surf until their lips turned blue, the average candidate fixated on the agony. Irvine, he dissected the experience objectively. My body is cold, my teeth are chattering, that's the data. Now can I continue? By stripping away the emotional narrative, this is unbearable, I can't do this, he accessed a reserve of stamina others never tap. Marcus Aurelius described this shift perfectly. The obstacle is the way. The pain wasn't an enemy to flee, it was the very path to strength. Irvine's breakthrough mirrors Stoic endurance training. The Romans practiced voluntary hardship, deliberate exposure to cold, hunger, and discomfort, not to punish themselves, but to inoculate against life's inevitable storms. Modern science confirms this. Navy SEAL who reframes suffering as a challenge to meet, rather than a threat to avoid, outperform peers by staggering margins. Irvine took this further, turning Stoic drills into daily rituals. Cold showers became his winter marches, fasting his field rations, and public speaking his fear exposure therapy. Each act was a rep in the gym of mental resilience. Here's where most men miss the mark. They think toughness means gritting teeth through hardship, white-knuckling until they break. The Stoic approach is subtler and far more effective. Irvine teaches the double command: acknowledge discomfort, this hurts, then redirect focus to what you control, but I choose my response. In Bud/S, that meant separating the physical reality of hypothermia from the mental spiral of panic. In dating, it's the difference between "she rejected me, I'm worthless," and "her decision is her choice, my growth is mine." Practical application: start small. Next time you're exhausted but consider skipping the gym, pause. Ask, is my body truly incapable, or is my mind inventing excuses? Irvine's rule: discomfort is information, not a stop sign. That shift from avoidance to curiosity transforms pain from an adversary to a teacher. Even something as simple as holding an ice cube while timing your breath builds the neural pathways to withstand bigger challenges. The brilliance of Irvine's method lies in its scalability. The same focus that got him through Hell Week helps men navigate rejection, career setbacks, or betrayal. When a SEAL candidate quits, it's rarely his body that fails, it's his narrative. "I can't" becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Stoicism flips the script: this is hard, I'm still here. That's the essence of mental toughness, not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to let struggle dictate your limits. Irvine's most radical insight. Fear is a story you tell yourself. SEAL who drown in panic during underwater drills aren't reacting to reality, they're reacting to their imagination of what might happen. The Stoic solution: preempt the story. Before entering a high-stakes situation, a first date, a difficult conversation, visualize the worst-case scenario, not to fear it, but to defang it. Irvine calls this negative visualization plus. See the disaster, then see yourself enduring it. When you've mentally rehearsed failure and survival, fear loses its paralyzing grip. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally agile. Irvine still felt every ounce of pain in training. He just refused to let it hijack his mission. Modern men can borrow this blueprint. When she ghosts you, acknowledge the sting, then ask, what's the next constructive move? That's Stoic toughness, feeling fully but acting wisely. As Irvine proved, the mind trained in Stoicism doesn't just endure chaos, it thrives in it. And that's the kind of man no one can control, because he's already mastered the only thing that ever truly could: his own mind. Cato the Younger walked through the streets of Rome dressed in the same plain toga year after year. Its rough fabric a stark contrast to the silk and purple robes favored by the political elite. When mocked for his outdated style, his reply cut to the core of Stoic values. I'd rather stand out by being different than by my clothing. That wasn't just frugality, it was a deliberate statement about where real power resides. While others used gold thread to stitch their status, Cotto let his integrity speak louder than any accessory. Modern dating is full of peacocking flashy cars, designer labels, exaggerated stories, all desperate attempts to scream, "Look at me." But the Stoic knows something timeless. Substance doesn't need a spotlight to be seen. Consider two men at a cocktail party. One rattles off his job title, his watch's price tag, the celebrities he supposedly met, each detail a calculated bid for validation. The other listens more than he speaks, asks thoughtful questions, and when the conversation turns to achievements, mentions his recent marathon finish with the same tone as discussing the weather. Who commands more respect? The peacock's feathers are bright but fragile. The Stoic's strength is quiet but unbreakable. Ancient Rome had its version of social media flexing. Senators flaunting exotic pets, imported wines, villas with marble floors. Cotto drank cheap wine from clay cups and slept on military cots even as Rome's most powerful senator. His contemporaries called him eccentric. History calls him unshakable. There's a lesson here for modern men. When you rely on external symbols to prove your worth, you hand others the power to define it. But when your confidence comes from internal virtues, discipline, integrity, resilience, no silent treatment or social slight can dent it. This isn't about rejecting style. A Stoic can appreciate fine things. Marcus Aurelius wore the imperial purple when duty required. The difference is independency. The man who needs a Rolex to feel important is the same man who'll crumble when a woman doesn't validate him. The Stoic's watch might be expensive or cheap, but his self-esteem isn't strapped to it. Practical application: audit your motives. That gym selfie, is it celebrating progress or fishing for compliments? The subtle name drop, does it serve the conversation or your ego? Cotto's brilliance was his consistency. He dressed plainly not just at public events but in private too. That's the test. Who are you when no one's watching? The irony: women sniff out pretense faster than social media algorithms. Peacocking might attract initial attention, but it's the man comfortable in his own skin, whether wearing a tailored suit or a thrift store flannel, who holds it. Like Cotto, his power isn't borrowed from labels, it's built through action. No outfit can disguise weak character, and no luxury car can outrun the truth of who you are. Musonius Rufus put it bluntly: what's the point of adorning your body while neglecting your soul? Modern translation: 1,000 Instagram followers can't compensate for shallow values. The Stoic invests in his mind, his mission, his resilience, assets no market crash or breakup can devalue. And when she encounters that depth, she doesn't just notice. She remembers. Marcus Aurelius began each dawn with a ritual that modern science would later validate as one of the most powerful mental exercises known to man. Before the chaos of empire building consumed his day, he'd isolate himself and journal a simple reminder: today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to the offender's ignorance of what is good or evil. This wasn't pessimism, it was psychological preparation. By anticipating life's friction before it arrived, he immunized himself against surprise and emotion. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, but strip away the Latin and you've got something far more practical. A morning mental workout that primes you to handle anything without losing your center. Imagine two men waking up. One scrolls through social media, absorbing a barrage of curated highlight reels that unconsciously seed comparison. The other spends 5 minutes grounding himself in Marcus exercise, visualizing traffic jams, unreasonable demands, even romantic disappointments, not to dwell on negativity but to defang it. By the time their feet hit the floor, one is already reacting to external stimuli, the other has rehearsed his composure. Neuroscience confirms this. Prefrontal cortex activity spikes during such visualization, strengthening the neural pathways for emotional regulation. The ancient Romans didn't have fMRI machines, but they didn't need them. They knew presence isn't passive, it's trained. Here's why this matters in dating. Most men get derailed by unexpected storms. She cancels last-minute panic. She's distant over-analysis, but the Stoic who's practiced presence sees these not as emergencies but as familiar terrain. Marcus wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." When you've mentally rehearsed handling silence or rejection, real-life versions don't trigger fight or flight, they trigger focus. This is the opposite of toxic positivity. It's not pretending things won't go wrong, but knowing you'll handle them when they do. Practical steps before checking your phone each morning. Ask Marcus question, what could challenge my peace today? Maybe it's a looming deadline, a difficult conversation, or the possibility she won't text back. Don't just list these, visualize your ideal response. If she ghosts, you'll channel the energy into your workout. If she's rude, you'll pause before reacting. This isn't manifesting misery, it's building emotional calluses. Like a firefighter running drills, you're not wishing for flames. You're ensuring they won't consume you when they appear. The modern world hijacks presence. Notifications, endless scrolling, and the dopamine chase of dating apps fracture attention into reactive shards. Contrast that with Marcus' discipline. Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. That's the secret. When you're fully present on a date, not rehearsing lines or fearing outcomes, you become magnetic. Women sense when a man isn't mentally scripting the next scene but truly listening, observing, engaging. Presence communicates security. I'm not anxious about where this is going because I'm complete where I am. But here's the twist: Stoics understood presence requires absence. To be fully here, you must routinely disconnect. Seneca practiced this by taking regular sabbaticals from his wealth, sleeping on hard beds and eating peasant food to remind himself comfort was optional. Modern translation: delete dating apps for a weekend. Leave your phone home during walks. Sit through the itch of boredom without reaching for stimulation. Each act is a vote for sovereignty over your attention. The man who can tolerate silence isn't desperate to fill it with chatter, with validation, with unnecessary texts. Marcus' journals reveal a shocking truth. The emperor who commanded legions feared his own potential for distraction. You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. Procrastination isn't just delaying tasks, it's postponing presence. The guy who says, "I'll set boundaries after one more date," or "I'll stop chasing when she shows more interest," is gambling with his peace. The Stoic starts now, not perfect conditions now, because presence isn't a technique, it's the bedrock of all other virtues. Clarity comes from contraction. Imagine tightening a camera lens until the blur resolves into sharp detail. That's what morning meditation did for Marcus. It filtered Rome's chaos into a single point, this moment. This action, this breath. When dating feels like navigating a hurricane, presence is your eye of the storm. Her moods, data, your reactions, choice, the future. Unwritten, all that exists is now, and the man rooted in now can't be controlled by ghosts of the past or mirages of the future. The final test: next time you're with her, notice where your mind goes. Are you listening or planning your reply, enjoying her company or projecting fantasies? Presence is the ultimate flex. It whispers, "I don't need this interaction to go anywhere to be complete." And that's when she leans in closest, not because you've played it cool, but because you're genuinely, unshakably here. Seneca's letters cut straight to the heart of modern dating's most painful paradox: how to love deeply without becoming enslaved by the very connection you crave. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Hold everything in your hands lightly. If you clutch it too tightly, you'll crush it." That's the essence of Stoic love: passion and freedom coexisting, not competing. Picture two men in relationships. The first texts constantly, panics when she's busy, and molds his schedule to hers. The second, he plans adventures but enjoys solitude just as much. He's fully present when they're together but never desperate when they're apart. The difference isn't intensity of feeling, it's the presence of an unshakable inner anchor. Stoicism doesn't teach emotional detachment, it redefines attachment. Seneca compared healthy relationships to holding a bird. Clench your fist, and it suffocates. Cradle it with open palms, and it may choose to stay. Ancient wisdom, but watch how it plays out today. The guy who demands constant reassurance, "Why didn't you text back faster?" unknowingly squeezes the life out of attraction. Meanwhile, the man who thrives independently, pursuing his mission, maintaining his friendships, growing whether she's watching or not, creates space for genuine desire to breathe. Seneca's own marriage to Paulina exemplified this balance. Historical accounts describe a partnership of deep affection, yet he routinely traveled for months without her, wrote letters about enjoying solitude, and encouraged her self-sufficiency. Contrast that with modern attachment styles theory, where secure individuals mirror Stoic ideals. They bond without merging, love without losing themselves. The lesson: independence isn't indifference, it's the foundation for sustainable connection. Here's where most men stumble: they confuse possession with passion. Seneca warned, "That which you love, you must first be willing to lose." Brutal, maybe, but consider the alternative. The man who builds his identity around a relationship becomes brittle. When she inevitably disappoints, as all humans do, his entire world cracks. The Stoic alternative: love like a gardener tending plants, watering faithfully but understanding growth isn't controlled by grip alone. Practical steps: first, audit your emotional accounting. Are you keeping score of her attention like a debt owed? Second, cultivate solo joy. Rediscover hobbies that existed before her and will outlast any relationship. Third, practice mental ownership. Seneca's exercise: imagine this ends tomorrow. Would I still say it was worth it? If the answer's no, you're not loving. You're leasing happiness under someone else's name. The irony: this unattached love often deepens bonds. Women sense when a man's presence is gift, not demand. His affection feels purer, not because he cares less, but because he's chosen her without needing her. That's Seneca's ultimate lesson. Love isn't about securing someone in your life. It's about being so complete in yours that sharing it becomes a celebration, not a necessity. Epictetus trained his students with an exercise that would baffle most modern men. He had them walk through crowded marketplaces, not to engage, but to observe without attachment. Control your gaze, he'd say, and you control your mind. At first glance, this sounds like a drill in willpower, but dig deeper, and you'll find one of Stoicism's most potent tools for emotional sovereignty. Imagine walking past a couple arguing, a vendor haggling aggressively, or an attractive stranger. Your instinct might be to stare, judge, or fantasize. Epictetus' challenge: see without being seized, notice without needing. That's the discipline of perception. Your eyes take in the world, but your mind decides what it means. Think of how often visual stimuli hijack your peace. Scrolling through social media, you see her out with another guy, your stomach tightens. At the gym, someone lifts heavier, you feel inferior. These reactions aren't inevitable, they're habits. The Stoics called this prohersis, the space between seeing and assigning value. When you master it, you become the curator of your attention, not its victim. Marcus Aurelius practiced this as emperor, writing, "What doesn't transmit light creates its own darkness." In modern terms, the image of her with someone else isn't the problem, your interpretation of it is. History offers a vivid test case. When the cynic philosopher Crates publicly mocked a young Zeno for blushing at crude jokes, Zeno didn't retaliate or shrink. He studied Crates' methods to harden his own composure. Later, as founder of Stoicism, he'd teach students to see without surrendering. Practical application: next time you're tempted to obsess over her Instagram story, pause. Ask, does this scene demand my emotional investment? Like a museum visitor observing paintings, you can acknowledge beauty or chaos without needing to own or fix it. Here's where neuroscience confirms ancient wisdom. The brain's amygdala, your threat detection system, fires when you perceive challenges to status or relationships. But the prefrontal cortex can veto that signal with a simple question. Is this mine to carry? Epictetus' marketplace drill wasn't about suppressing natural reactions. It was about strengthening that mental veto. Modern life bombards you with visual triggers, provocative ads, envy-inducing posts, deliberate provocations. The man who controls his gaze doesn't avoid them, he renders them powerless. Try this reframe: your attention is currency. Every glance is a micro-investment. Staring at an ex's profile, that's a withdrawal from your emotional bank account. Lingering on a rival's success, you're paying for his highlight reel with your peace. The Stoic allocates attention like a savvy investor, only where returns justify the cost. When Seneca advised Lucilius to screen incoming impressions like a guard at the gate, he wasn't preaching ignorance, he was advocating selective engagement. The ultimate test: practice visual fasting. For a day, note every glance that stirs unease, comparisons, resentments, cravings, then categorize them: necessary, optional, toxic. Like decluttering a closet, you'll find most of what you consume visually isn't just useless, it's corrosive. Epictetus warned, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Control the view, and you control the disturbance. That's how a Stoic walks through the modern marketplace, seeing everything, owned by nothing. There's a reason poker players wear sunglasses. It's not just about blocking glare, it's about concealing tells. The Stoics took this principle far beyond card tables, turning emotional opacity into a life strategy. Consider Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon. His face betrayed nothing as he led his legions into civil war, while his officers trembled with visible doubt. That's not just battlefield tactics, it's psychological leverage. When your emotions are illegible, no one can predict your next move or exploit your weaknesses. The Stoics didn't advocate this as manipulation, but as protection. Marcus Aurelius perfected this as emperor. Amid Senate betrayals and barbarian invasions, his journals reveal a man who processed turmoil internally while projecting granite calm. He wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But here's the key: he let others see the dye, not the dyeing process. Modern psychology confirms this. People assign greater competence and authority to those whose emotional states are measured. Think of the difference between a boss who rages at setbacks versus one who responds with unreadable poise. Who commands more respect, who's harder to manipulate? History's most effective leaders understood this duality. George Washington's contemporaries often remarked on his sphinx-like silence. During the Revolutionary War, he cultivated an aura of inscrutability, never confirming or denying rumors even to his closest aides. The result: his enemies overplayed their hands, mistaking his restraint for indecision. The Stoic parallel is striking. When you don't furnish reactions, others project their own fears onto your blank slate. But here's where most men misinterpret Stoic opacity. It's not about becoming robotic or withholding affection. It's about controlling emotional leakage that others could weaponize. Take dating. The guy who texts, "Why haven't you replied?" after 30 minutes hands her the playbook to his insecurities. Contrast that with the man who matches her cadence, not as a game, but because his peace isn't contingent on her validation. She can't control what she can't predict. Practical training: start small. Next time someone provokes you, a snide comment, a disrespectful tone, practice the 3-beat pause. Breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. That 12-second window is where impulsive reactions go to die. Epictetus trained his students to see their expressions as fortifications. Don't let your face broadcast what your mind hasn't decided. The brilliance of emotional opacity lies in its paradox. By revealing less, you often gain more. When she can't gauge how her mixed signals affect you, she either steps forward to clarify or reveals her indifference. Both outcomes give you data without costing you dignity. Like Marcus watching treasonous senators squirm, unsure if he detected their plots, the power isn't in the reaction. It's in the space between action and response where uncertainty breeds respect. Cato the Younger took this further, using silence as a weapon. When political rivals baited him with insults, his non-reactions unnerved them more than any counterattack. His biographers noted that his face was a fortress, not cold but impregnable. Modern application: when she tests you with a provocative remark, "You're not jealous, are you?" Answering with a slight smirk and subject change communicates more than any denial ever could. The Stoic twist: opacity isn't deception, it's curation. You're not hiding emotions, you're choosing which serve your purpose. Seneca wrote letters brimming with warmth, yet confessed he practiced, never letting the public see his whole mind. That's the balance: open enough to connect, guarded enough to remain ungovernable. The man who masters this doesn't just become hard to read, he becomes impossible to control. Epictetus drew a line in the sand 2,000 years ago that still separates the anxious from the unshakable in modern dating. Some things are up to us and some are not. This isn't philosophy, it's the ultimate filter for emotional survival in an era of ghosting, breadcrumbing, and mixed signals. Picture this: she leaves you on read for 3 days. The average guy spirals into detective mode, analyzing past messages, wondering if he said something wrong, maybe even firing off a follow-up text laced with insecurity. The Stoic: he checks the facts, I hit send, the rest is her territory. That's the dichotomy of control in action, not indifference, but razor-sharp focus on where your agency begins and ends. Consider how most relationships crumble, not from honest disagreements, but from wasted energy, men trying to manage what isn't theirs to manage. Her punctuality, her social media habits, her level of affection, these are her sovereign choices. Your reaction, your standards, your decision to stay or walk, that's your domain. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius faced rebellions and betrayals, yet his private journals reveal a man obsessed only with his own virtue. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Modern translation: you can't control her flakiness, but you can control how many chances you give it. Let's make this painfully practical. When she cancels last minute, the victim complains, "She doesn't respect my time." The Stoic audits his boundaries. Do I double book my weekends waiting on her? Do I leave my schedule flexible for maybes? That's the pivot from powerless to empowered. Epictetus trained his students to ask 2 questions when faced with obstacles. Is this mine to fix? If yes, act. If no, detach. Apply that to dating. Her texting habits aren't your curriculum. Your self-respect is. The brilliance of this dichotomy: it reveals hidden leverage. Every moment spent agonizing over her behavior is stolen from improving yours. Like a chess player fixated on his opponent's pieces instead of his own strategy, you lose by distraction. The Stoic redirects that energy inward. Instead of "Why is she distant?" he asks, "Does her distance align with what I'll accept?" That subtle shift, from diagnosing her to deciding for yourself, is how you reclaim sovereignty. History's greatest strategists mastered this focus. When Hannibal crossed the Alps with war elephants to attack Rome, the Senate panicked. Some senators wanted to flee, others to surrender. Scipio Africanus did neither. He couldn't control Hannibal's movements, so he sailed to Carthage instead, forcing the enemy to play on his terms. That's the Stoic playbook. When you can't dictate her actions, elevate yours. If she's inconsistent, that's data, not a summons to negotiate your worth. Double down on your purpose, your growth, your peace. Let her choose whether to match that energy. Here's where men misinterpret Stoicism. Detachment isn't apathy, it's precision. The farmer doesn't curse the weather, he adjusts his crops. The sailor doesn't command the wind, he trims his sails. Likewise, the emotionally intelligent man doesn't waste breath demanding she change. He observes, adapts, and if necessary, walks. That's the quiet power of focusing on what's yours. The less you try to control her, the more control you actually gain. Because when she senses your happiness isn't hostage to her choices, you become the one thing no one can manipulate, a man who's already free. The greatest irony of power is this: the tighter you try to grip it, the faster it slips through your fingers. Think of the men who have left lasting legacies, not the tyrants who micromanaged every detail, but the leaders who cultivated self-mastery so profound that others followed willingly. The Stoics grasped this paradox centuries ago. True control isn't about dominating external circumstances, it's about releasing your obsession with them. Imagine a commander who demands absolute loyalty through fear versus one who inspires devotion through unwavering integrity. One rules with clenched fists, the other leads with open hands. Both achieve influence, but only one retains it without constant vigilance. Take Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who could have crushed dissent with a word, yet chose instead to govern his own reactions first. His private journal reveals a startling priority: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. That's the pivot from manipulating others to mastering yourself. Modern dating mirrors this. The guy who polices her social media, interrogates her male friends, or punishes her for innocent interactions doesn't secure loyalty, he engineers resentment. Contrast that with the man so grounded in his own purpose that her freedom becomes irrelevant to his peace. She can't rebel against boundaries he doesn't need to enforce because his standards live inwardly, not as demands on her. Here's where Stoicism flips conventional wisdom. Most relationship advice preaches controlled tactics: how to make her miss you, how to spark jealousy, how to keep her interested. The Stoic path: outgrow the very need for those levers. Like a blacksmith who stops fearing theft once his arms are strong enough to defend his forge. You stop fearing her unpredictability when your emotional resilience outweighs her capacity to disturb it. Seneca captured this in his letters. No man is free who is a slave to his own passions. The man who needs to control others is confessing he can't control himself. Practical transformation starts with a simple audit. Next time you feel the urge to check her location, dissect her tone, or accidentally bump into her out with friends, pause. Ask what fear is driving this: insecurity about your worth, anxiety over abandonment. The Stoic doesn't suppress these feelings, he interrogates them. Like a surgeon removing shrapnel, he extracts the foreign belief that his value depends on her choices. That's when the magic happens, when you realize controlling her was never the goal. It was a misguided attempt to control how her actions made you feel. History's most respected leaders embodied this release. George Washington voluntarily surrendered power twice after winning the Revolutionary War and again after his presidency, when he could have easily become a monarch. His restraint didn't diminish his authority, it immortalized it. In relationships, the same principle applies. The man who can say, stay or go, but no, I won't alter my code to keep you, doesn't weaken his position. He defines it: this isn't passive resignation, it's strategic sovereignty. The sailor who spends all day cursing the wind arrives nowhere. The one who adjusts his sails harnesses it. Stoicism teaches that people, like weather patterns, operate by their own nature. Trying to control her inconsistency is as futile as commanding the tides. But building an inner compass that keeps you steady regardless, that's the ultimate power. The final test is this: can you love without clutching? Can you commit without confining? When you stop treating relationships as territory to defend and start seeing them as shared journeys, you embody the rarest form of strength, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it's too busy living itself. That's the secret the Stoics whispered across 2 millennia. The less you need to control others, the more you inspire their respect. And in that space of mutual freedom, you'll find something far richer than dominance: unshakable authenticity. So there it is, 25 Stoic principles that transform not just how you show up in relationships, but who you become as a man. These aren't tricks to manipulate attraction or scripts to memorize. They're the raw materials for building an unshakable foundation: emotional mastery, negative visualization, the dichotomy of control, voluntary discomfort. Each principle is a thread in the armor of a man who can't be controlled because he's already mastered himself. But here's the truth: no video can bypass for you. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. The Stoics didn't scribble these ideas for applause. They lived them in blood and bone. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire on the brink of collapse while journaling about humility. Epictetus, a crippled slave, taught kings about freedom. What's your excuse? A busy schedule, a few rejections. The real question isn't whether these principles work, it's whether you'll work them. Start small, but start now. Pick one principle, just one, and weaponize it this week. If you're drowning in overanalysis, practice the Stoic pause breathe for 12 seconds before reacting to her text. If you're addicted to validation, try a day of digital fasting: no likes, no posts, no scrolling through her stories. The goal isn't perfection, it's momentum. Every ancient oak began as a stubborn acorn breaking through dirt. Epictetus left us with a challenge that echoes across 2,000 years. If not now, when? Not tomorrow when you're ready, not someday when life calms down. Now, while the fire of frustration still burns in your chest. Now, while her indifference still stings enough to motivate change. The Stoics knew a secret most men never grasp: waiting for the right moment is just procrastination in disguise. The right moment is the one you choose. So here's your final test. Close this video, but don't close the challenge. Let today be the line in the sand between who you were and who you're becoming. The man who masters these principles doesn't just win in love. He redefines what winning means. The choice is yours. The clock's already ticking. If not now, when?